and you just notice you're using your whole body when you're doing a big painting, particularly. Standing up can help you. I like to paint flat. A lot of people don't. They paint on an easel, but I use a lot of water in it. I don't want it to drip too much. And usually you hold your brush at the end. It's not like you're doing a calligraphy or writing an essay. You're using your whole arm and your whole hand and getting some body movement that way. So, I will try to sort of tell you what color I'm using. This one is, actually it's not a alizarin crimson, but it's close, I think. It's a cool red, and I've gotten some of these mixed up down here on the end. I'm not real worried about it. It's a cool red like alizarin crimson, and you can see I'm getting the paint moving. You want the water to be moving, and you want it to be see-through, and you want enough of it to get yourself going. And that's another reason to get a white palette. You can see what the color's going to look like on your paper. I'm touching a little cobalt blue in there. It's going to be violet now. And I like that to get started for some of the vines of these climbing roses. And as you paint, you will learn to look for the colors that are there and the variety, and learn to use color. I like to use it expressively, and it helps the visually to balance my painting and lead the viewer's eyes to the painting. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to start moving some of these vines up. And one thing about color, when you are putting some of it in certain places, you know, you don't want to just have color. And see, I've got some of my color I call gutter, which is the goo in the corners. It toned that down and muted it a little bit. So this is more muted and this is brighter. So I'm going to weave just a little bit of that muted over here to just you know, introduce that color. I don't want it to be in just one place in the painting. And I can be real loose right now, which is fun. So then I've got that puddle, and I often will say, okay, I'm going to adjust that. I'm going to just put some of this orange in it, make it more brown. One thing about color, you probably know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The primary colors are basically red, yellow, and blue. And if you mix the three of them together, a red, a yellow, and a blue, you're going to get a brown or a gray. Okay, and that's just what I've done. Because I had the cool red, we'll say it was alizarin, the blue, cobalt, and I touched some of this cadmium yellow deep probably in, and now I've got this brown. So even though you would look at those rose vines, stalks, and say, oh, they're brown. Yes, they are, but if I paint everything brown, it's going to be so boring and dull, and I don't want to do it that way. I don't paint real completely naturalistically, so that's a choice. There are other people who would paint those rose canes just like they are, and I'm not going to do it that way. Okay, and in fact, I'm going to add, this is Scarlet Lake. It's a really intense red, and if you can't see or anything, get where you can see, okay? You're not going to bother me unless you stand right in front of the table. But please feel free to come up around me if you want to. I'm going to add a little of that yellow in there. That's a really bright, intense orange. I'm going to add a little bit of this in. Just give it a few shakes. And when you paint and you let the wet paint touch other wet paint and mix on the paper, it's called wet and wet. That's a beautiful aspect of watercolor.
Can you say that again?
When you have wet paint and you touch wet paint into it and let the colors mix on the page, it's called wet and wet. Wet in wet. It's a watercolor technique. And it's beautiful because it blends and moves. I also do a lot of dropping water into paint. Like if I want it to move around, I might say, well, I'm going to drop this here. And because of capillary action, unless you get too heavy-handed with the water, it will contain the water and move the paint around in a different way, and it will make a little edge eventually around the color. I don't do it all the time, but I do it a lot. Like this one, I like the way that looks, but if I drop this on it carefully, the water, it pushes that paint and settles it in a different way on the paper. So I do a lot of wet and wet, and I do a lot of water onto the paint. Now, I'm going to add some of this Veronese green in here and see what happens. Right here. And I keep getting water. You don't want it to get where it's not moving around. Now sometimes I'll use thicker paint, you'll see, but right now this is you want it to be wet and moving.
And you don't worry about the other color that you left there?
I like to mix into my color mixes. I will use the color I've already got going. Now, not always. Sometimes I'll clean all this up and really get going, but this is sort of the preliminary underpainting colors. And if you use what you've had before, it will help harmonize your painting. In other words, I'm not worrying about it. And a lot of that's just practice and doing it a long time. So, I'm dosing a lot at you at once, but I want you to see all these exercises we're going to do. The end result is freedom in being able to paint freely this way and enjoy yourself. That's the goal. It's not to be a perfectionist, okay? At least for me. Like I said, this is one person's view on watercolor painting, and you will develop your own if you keep painting.
So in a lot of your paintings, all the colors have like every other color.
They have a lot of colors in them.
Right.
It's not just like I go, oh, green, let's get that one green and stick it on here. No.
But every color is like
they're all
built upon like
a lot of times. Now sometimes I'll have a whole nother puddle, or I'll have something very specific I'll mix up. But for this, the vines, they're really in silhouette, and I'm going to eventually kind of be having them, they're going to kind of, what's the right word? You're not going to see them like you're seeing them now, because your focus is going to be on the other things. But this is a nice frame, so to speak, a natural frame for this piece, and it gives you an ambiance to the painting. If I just had a plain straight edge around the building, it would be a completely different experience. This is more of an intimate, gives you that feeling you're sort of in the arbor and you're enjoying the intimacy of Italy. A lot of it's about emotion. Let's see, some out here. Okay, now I've got that going, not completely through with it, but I'm going to think about, all right, now the next thing, I've got to think about, I've got to balance the structures, which are like the wall, the pots, the path, the building, the pipe, with all the foliage and the flowersy stuff. But like I said, those fuchsia flowers, if I want them to be bright and clean, I can't put them on top of a bunch of green leaves. I can't put them on top of dark, even sandy rocks. They're not going to have the same punch. So I've got to think about, since I don't draw, I've got to think about where is everything going to be in the painting. And I do a lot of saying, okay, I've got this going. Where is the wall going to intersect the edge of the paper? I do a lot of, you can do a lot of tricks, like if you hold your brush perpendicular and straight, not like this, you got to have it up and down, and you go over here and you turn it and you touch the angle of the wall. It will give you kind of the angle that the wall is actually going in space, because we're taking this three-dimensional world and transposing it onto a two-dimensional surface. So that gives me an idea of where the wall is going to be happening. And then I'll think to myself, I'll draw a lot with my finger, like where are these chairs about, if the painting is 2 brushes high, how big are those chairs really in the front? They are about, that first one, the bottom of the table to the top of the chairs, 3/4 of a brush. So I will say to myself, okay, here's 2 brushes worth. And the chairs are going to go to about right here. They're about this big in the painting, so it's deceiving. You think, well, the building's so much bigger, but when you're transferring it, it's not as much as you think. So that's 1. So let's see how big that building is. It's just a little over 1. It's like, this is 3/4 and that's 1, because it's way back in space. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you have to think. And when you're drawing, say you're going to be doing some of that, it will help you to say, well, even though my mind tells me the building is huge and the chair is small, since it's in the front, it's in the foreground, it's bigger in relationship to the space in the back. So you can do some measuring this way. It's all about relationships, and you can do some angle assessment this way. And if you can't decide, is the roof going up? Is the roof going down? What's happening? Or the road, what's happening? Where about? So if the painting is about 2 brushes wide, so it's not quite 2 brushes high. It's wider than, where are these things going to be, and how much of the painting has got the foliage? 1, 2. The foliage comes about a good 1/3 of the way out into this part of the painting. Then I look here, I see the big wisterias kind of about right here, and then the chairs come, and then the building is really up here. It's smaller than you think, because I want the mountains. It's easy. I mean, I have a hard time with that too, without doing drawing. Sometimes I get off with things, but then I just think nobody else knows. I'll go with it. You got to harmonize everything. It's like you're really it's all about relationships. Okay.
Why did you stop drawing?
When I went on my first workshops, the teacher said, lose the pencil, and it made me so angry. But Browning had told me, listen to what they say, and I thought, okay, I'll listen, and I did it. It changed my life. So it was so much better, so much more fun, because I don't know what it's going to be. So it's not like I'm just painting by number, and that's a lot more fun to me. It's a personal preference. So this is Hooker's green. I like Hooker's. It's a classic green. So I'm gonna be painting some of these big shapes down here in the front. Because of how I paint, I often do things in the foreground, and I do things that I want to be real clear colors first. So I'm going to make a couple of puddles. This one is called Cadmium Lemon. It's a really bright, it's an opaque. Some of the colors are more transparent than others, even though you're using them all transparently. Cad Lemon is considered an opaque watercolor. And then Hooker's it's pretty transparent. So then I might say I'm going to go over here and get, this is quinacridone gold, I think. I'm going to put some of that over there. I'm going to have
When did you just squeeze new bottles of paint? Like
a few minutes ago before y'all got here. I put just a few of them. Some of them are dry. So, okay. I'm put some more hookers in there.
And does it matter if it's not, it's dry or not?
It's harder
dry?
to get it up.